and under his wings shalt thou trust. His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked, because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. Let us pray. God our Father, you have been our help in ages past. You are only hope and trust in times to come. And so we come to you asking for your grace, asking for your mercy, asking for your strength as we gather in this place to do the business of this country. Like David of old, you have been with us against the bear and the lion. And so God, you will stand with us against this Goliath that we face today. And so we lay our thoughts and our cares upon you because we know that you care for us. Keep us in all that we do now. Have your will and have your way in the midst of us. In Jesus' name we pray. Our Father, hallowed be thy name. And give us this day as we forgive those. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever. Amen.
Gilbert Minnis, Peter Trancrest, Grant Simonet, Desmond Bannister, Leonard Wells, Jeffrey Lloyd, Dwayne Sands, Marvin James, Frankie Campbell, Dionisio de Aguila, Michael Pintard, Darren Henfield, Ramon Ferreira, Renisha Roll, Bransel Roll, Ellsworth Johnson, Philip Davis, Warren Miller, Letitia Parker Edgecombe, Iram Lewis, Carlton Bullock, James Albury, Travis Robinson, Adrian Gibson, Donald Saunders, Frederick McAlpine, Hank Johnson, Mark Holmes, Michael Stokes, Miriam Rackley Emmanuel, Lisa Chipman, Ruben Rumming, Ricky Markey, Shannon Dawn Cartwright, Danielle Ferguson, Leonard Martin, Faisal Forbes, Chester Cooper.
Good morning again, honorable members. Honorable members, as a consequence of the circumstance that we are faced with, this meeting will also be considered an extraordinary meeting, and those persons who are not in attendance and the speaker not having received any indication of an intention not to attend, those members will be deemed present. In a few days, members, this Parliament will be celebrating 291 years of parliamentary democracy. The 290th anniversary was celebrated under the theme, Strengthening and Deepening Our Democracy. This year, the 291st year, we have adopted the theme, Enhancing Public Trust in the Institutions of Democracy. We'll say a little bit more about that at a later date. But at this time, because of the circumstances, we will move ahead with the order of business. introduction and swearing in of new members, laying of documents by ministers, statements and communications by ministers, communication by the clerk, messages from the Governor General, messages from the Senate, motion for leave of absence, leave to resign seat, and new writs, presentations of petitions, presentation and reports of committees, adoption of reports of committees, first reading of bills, second reading and committal of bills. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I rise to move the second reading at the middle of the bill. Speaker, I rise to move the second reading to the middle of the bill for an act to amend the Register of Beneficial Ownership Act 2020. Mr. Speaker, I rise on behalf of the members of the great constituency of East Grand Bahama, on whose behalf I have the privilege and honor of being an honorable member of this House. Mr. Speaker, a member of this House will recall that in December 2019, we enacted a suite of laws aimed at defending the integrity of the Bahamas financial sector. At that time, we faced the threat of severe reduction of business and jobs in the financial services industry and the consequential erosion of our middle class. As the closure of financial institutions and the loss of investor confidence became more and more real with each day, that we were on lists such as the European Union list of non-cooperative jurisdictions for tax purposes and the Financial Action Task Force list of countries with strategic anti-money laundering or counter-financial terrorist financing deficiencies. Our actions were divisive and necessarily swift. We passed the Commercial Enterprise Substance Requirements Act, the Removal of Preferential Exemptions Act, an amendment to the Penal Code criminalizing tax evasion, and the Register of Beneficial Ownership Act, which we are seeking to amend today. This was not the first time that we walked the thin line between balancing business sustainability and compliance with the international financial regulations in an attempt to safeguard our financial services industry. Since the early 1990s, the Bahamas has endured the intense scrutiny of watchdogs like the OECD and the Financial Action Task Force with respect to our legal framework to curtail financial crimes. Like other financial centers in the Caribbean, the Bahamas has had to guard against the encroachment of its sovereignty, disguised as calls for greater transparency and cooperation by international organizations and governments alike. We have had to commit resources, scarce, sacred resources that we really do not have, at both a high financial and human capital cost, to combat the stigmatization of our financial services industry as the bastion of money derived from illegal activity. Oftentimes, in response to our adoption of international financial standards, we are accused of simply acquiescing to the dicta of advanced economies and countries by those who do not, and sometimes by those that should know and do know of the real damage that just the mere whisper of the possibility of a blacklisting can do to our financial services industry and, by extension, the second pillar of our economy at large. But it is simple, Mr. Speaker. If the Bahamas is to remain the global financial ecosystem, we must comply with the rules that govern operating in that environment. If only to be able to support our arguments on the legitimacy of our industry and to decry the use of blacklists and other punitive actions by certain countries to coerce us to implement measures that expand the parameters of the accepted standards, and to demand that the global standards be equitable and equitably applied against all participants in the global financial arena. To borrow a common maxim that legally trained persons among us will be very familiar with, he who comes to equity must come clean hands. Meaning, if we are asking to be treated fairly in international tax matters, we must be able to show that we are also acting fair. And so, Mr. Speaker and members of this honorable chamber, this bill to amend the Register of Beneficial Ownership Act that we are debating today is another weapon in our arsenal to counter the narrative that the Bahamas financial services industry operates outside of the regulatory bounds accepted by the international financial community. More importantly, Mr. Speaker, it is to protect against the abuse of our financial services industry by persons attempting to use our financial institutions and products to avoid declaring or to abate the true extent of their financial assets to the relevant authorities in their home countries, or as a shield to hide or launder illicit assets. The bill provides for the specific inclusion of the nonprofit organizations limited by shares, or NPOs, and the segregated account companies, or SAC, or SAC as we call them, in the definition of entities covered by the Act. While it can be argued that a SAC, not a St. Augustine, while it can be argued that a SAC would have already been within the scope of the Act on the basis that a SAC is either an IBC or a Companies Act company, we felt that it was important to expressly state that SACs were included, given the intrinsic operation of a SAC could be viewed as a vulnerability to our anti-money laundering framework with respect to the identification of beneficial owners. This is because the assets of a segregated asset company are not pooled and deemed to be owned by the shareholder of the company, as is usually the case, but rather different individuals other than the shareholders of the segregated asset company beneficially own the assets of the SAC in separate accounts within a segregated asset company. In other words, it's looking through the front of the company and looking to the actual beneficial ownership of individual accounts that this overall company might be managing, and creates an obligation for them to identify beneficial owners of those accounts. The bill also fine-tunes the definition of beneficial owner with respect to nonprofit organizations and partnerships, common law partnerships, limited partnerships, and exempt limited partnerships, by defining who the beneficial owners of such entities are. The bill imposes a duty on the Registrar General to provide beneficial ownership information in those cases where a legal entity does not have a registered agent. A compliance unit has been established in the Registrar General's Department to monitor the provisions of beneficial ownership information and other compliance measures related to the Register of Beneficial Ownership Registry. 2 senior attorneys at the Office of the Attorney General have been assigned to this unit, and a 3rd is being trained. Mr. Speaker, this bill will address a major recommendation by the Financial Action Task Force with respect to ensuring that no person is able to hide their identity through the use of a Bahamian entity. There was consultation and consensus on the provisions of the bill with our key financial services stakeholders, including the Association of International Banks and Trust Companies, the Bahamas Financial Services Board, and the Securities Commission as Inspector of Financial and Corporate Service Providers under the FCSP Act. There is unanimous agreement that the bill, once passed, will bolster our efforts to be removed from the FATF's ICRG process. Due to COVID-19 related travel restrictions, the FATF has not been able to conduct the in-country assessment of our AML CFT regime, which is the last hurdle to being removed from the FATF's list of countries with strategic AML CFT deficiencies. Removal from the FATF's list has been cited by the EU as a requirement for them to not include the Bahamas in the impending EU AML CFT list of third countries. So as members of this House will agree, the implications of this bill for the Bahamas are far-reaching, and the implementation of the measures proposed vital to safeguarding the integrity of the financial sector and the reputation of the jurisdiction. Mr. Speaker, this is just one more of a set of financial legislation, financial-related legislation that we have passed in this House over the last 3 years. And while I know that some may feel that the House is dominated by financial services bills, the reality is in this fast-moving and ever-changing environment, the need for legislative adjustments and tweaking are just as onerous and just as fast and rapidly coming. And thus, as we try to secure, as I mentioned, this vital, important industry that has helped to build and sustain, particularly the middle class in this country, it is important that we react, and we seem to be reacting not only in relation to the matters that are being forced upon us, but also being proactive to get ahead of the challenges that we know that will come. This bill, this amendment bill, is one of those pieces of legislation that is proactive, that we know is posing a bit of challenge and discussion at the international regulatory level, and we are getting ahead of the curve to ensure that this does not become one of those matters where we are forced to have to make adjustments. Mr. Speaker, so then the objectives of this piece of legislation, as I sum up, is one, in Section 2, to amend the definition of the legal entity to specifically include segregated account companies and nonprofit companies not limited by shares, to insert the definition of a segregated account and a segregated account company. In Section 5, to add the directors of nonprofit companies not limited by shares and the partners of exempt limited liability partnerships or limited liability partnerships to the category of persons who are considered beneficial owners whose identities must be disclosed for the purposes of the Act. Section 8, to provide that the beneficial owner's identity information pertaining to all beneficial owners of legal entities and of registrable legal entities to which the Act applies to be notified to the company's registered agent, or if the entity has no registered agent, to the Registrar General, who are obligated to verify the identity of the beneficial owners or registrable legal entity and to collect and maintain the particulars specified. In Section 9, to provide for the Registrar General to establish and maintain a database and to enter into the database the particulars of beneficial ownership required by Section 9 for those legal entities without registered agents. And in Section 11, to oblige legal entities who have no registered agent to notify the Registrar General of any changes in their beneficial ownership and the date of any such changes. To oblige the Registrar General to cause the updated information to be entered into the database. Again, Mr. Speaker, this is an important piece of legislation amendment to ensure that we give ourselves an opportunity to be excluded from any further review by the FATF when they do eventually come to the jurisdiction to do their on-site, so that hopefully we are removed from this threat of blacklisting again, and we are able to help protect our financial services industry as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Yamakro.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. I rise to second the amendment to the res on behalf of the good people of Yamakro. to second the amendment to the Registration of Beneficial Ownership Amendment Bill. Thank you very much. And also, Mr. Speaker, to commend the member for East Grand Bahama for such an excellent presentation. Mr. Speaker, I would like to extend condolences to the family of the young boy who lost his life recently, and to identify most certainly not just my dissatisfaction, but I'm quite certain, and the Prime Minister will speak to it, the dissatisfaction of the most honorable Prime Minister and the government of the Bahamas of what recently happened, and also to all those families who have lost their lives as a result of the pandemic that we're presently going through. In all things, Mr. Speaker, we must give thanks, and I say to God be the glory, because He gives and He takes away, and that was one of the things that comforted me when my sister departed this realm to go to glory. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I commend, one of the reasons for commending East Grand Bahama in his presentation on the amendment of this bill, which came to fore in December, the 20th of December 2018, is because he says, "Who comes to equity must come with clean hands." And recently I had an opportunity to have a chat with a very brilliant young man, and I had to remind him of a book that I took. I found very interesting, rewarding, and stimulating by Mr. Rodney. Pardon me? Walter Rodney. I'm quite certain that Mr. Folks, the former Governor General, every time I speak about these books, I quoted Franz Fanon one day, and his son came to me and said, Mr. Dion Folks, Minister Dion Folks, and said, "Boy, Dad, I heard you quote that book," and he was very excited. But Walter Rodney book on how Europe underdeveloped Africa speaks to a situation where base erosion and profit shifting is not a recent phenomenon. The transatlantic shipment of hundreds of thousands of human beings into slavery demonstrated the classic and vintage form of base erosion and profit shifting. The genocide of thousands of persons in what we call the New World, or the sectioning of the world and determining that this is mine, and I will take it, your women, your children, and introduce things that they've never seen before in their lives, and resulted in the genocide of millions. It's a classic form of destruction, base erosion, profit shifting. And so when we decide to speak of these things, money laundering, terrorism, financing, we have a rich history that we all, the entire world, can learn from. And as I started, I said, to God be the glory. He gives and He takes away. As I start my presentation on the Register of Beneficial Ownership Amendment Bill, which in layman's terms, Mr. Speaker, just the international community and the Bahamas, because we want to be, and we are, a transparent, clean, first-class jurisdiction to practice financial services. We want to know who we're working with, or who we're doing business with. And that is the standard the world requires, so that we're not interacting with persons who would attempt to launder money. We would not be participating or encouraging the use of funds that are derived as a result of human trafficking, which is the new definition for slavery. And we know about slavery. and we would not be participating in anything that is considered to be an identified risk. And so for everybody at home, and I know my parents, my mother, my aunts and Kid Island who are watching is going to ask me, boy, what are you talking about today? And so, this is what we're dealing with. So the beneficial ownership reporting requirements in the Bahamas require us to know these persons, to know who are the owners, who are benefiting. And what we have done is as the member for East Grand Bahama said, we have created a registry, which is not a public registry, which all the agents, you have to tell the competent authority who these persons are. They entered into that registry. And if need be, because we have cross-border cooperation. Let's say, for instance, someone from the UK or some of our persons who signed on wants to know who is here doing what. We're able to, while protecting the confidentiality of an individual's business, we're able to stop what we consider as international crime. And so here we are today, Mr. Speaker, looking at the amendment of, or discussing or debating the Register of Beneficial Ownership Amendment Bill. I want to commend the Minister for this bill. It is being properly, we have done proper consultation. And so this bill has made the round. And so I don't think that there would be any contention in terms of the passing of this bill. Let's just seek, Mr. Speaker, in Section 2 to make some grammatical changes, Mr. Speaker, and to identify new persons or new groups or new entities, legal entities, that would be consider that we would want information on. Amendment Section 3 of the bill, which speaks to the amendment of Section 5 of the Principal Act, is amended by deleting and substituting a section. So for non-profit incorporated under the Companies Act, as a company, not limited by shares in natural person, being a director of a non-profit, you would want to know who those individuals are, because we know that 9/11, we are in September. 9/11 was principally put off by non-profits. And so you would want to know who are the persons who are coming in. And I want to commend the church, the church in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for their participation, and everybody in civil society participated in this. Because when we first started, everybody wanted to know. Why you want to know my information? I remember when I first debated this bill, he said, it was a little satirical when I said we want to know who is the person who may be the owner, directing mind and will of, let's say, for instance, the Naked Truth Baptist Church. You have to know who they are, and it's the real name of a church. And so you would not want to set up a church and you don't know who, speaking, you're laughing, you don't know who are the persons behind these entities. So you want to know who's moving monies back and forth. And so we would want to know that. And so for instance, there's a requirement in knowing the principles in the case of a segregated accounts company, a natural person being the beneficial owner of each segregated account company. So we are expanding the definition of person who we just want to know who you are. There's nothing sinister behind it, because we want to have a transparent jurisdiction. As I said, and when I first debated this bill, we have an obligation to say to the world that we know who are the persons who are conducting business within the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, and that we only want fit and proper persons in the Bahamas doing business. And so Section 4 of this bill amends Section 8 of the Principal Act. And it reads as follows: Section 8 of the Principal Act is amended by deleting the section and substituting the following section: a legal entity shall, within 15 days of identifying any person as a beneficial owner or a registrable legal entity, notify the Registrar General. So the legal owner has an obligation to provide information. If they take all reasonable steps to do that, it exonerates them from any liabilities or any sanctions. And so it creates an obligation on persons or legal entities to say, and even when you change names or address, to furnish that information to the Registrar General. As I said before, it's a secure digital database where the information of everybody is properly protected. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to be very long. That's basically it on the Register of Beneficial Ownership Amendment Bill, is to ensure that we know who are the beneficial owners of any entity in the Bahamas, and that these persons, their actions are above board, that they're not attempting in any way to launder illicit funds or to participate in any activity that we have designated as an identified risk. And I deliberately identified trafficking in persons, which is known as the new label for slavery. Mr. Speaker, I agree with East Grand Bahama that there are countries around the world which are faced in the very same situation, but the consequences are much different. And we are in a world, we're not complaining. We've demonstrated that we have the versatility, the intellectual aptitude to participate, and we're going to continue to do that. And as I've been saying to the persons that I work with, that failure is not an option. We don't give up, we dig in. And COVID-19 has taught us that there are new, innovative ways that we must and we are participating in this new era, in the new normal. So, Mr. Speaker, I second this amendment on behalf of the good people of Yamakro, and I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. A bill for an act to amend the Register of Beneficial Owners Act. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity on behalf of the fearless and resilient people of Exuma Keys, and Ragged Island. I rise to make a contribution to the amendment to the Register of Beneficial Owners Act. When we debated this bill 2 years ago, I expressed the need for extreme diligence over this register and the need to ensure we were approaching this carefully so as not to disadvantage our financial services industry. Now, here we are 2 years later, tying up loose ends and cleaning up what was apparently not thoroughly thought through at the time. It's either that or our international bodies have once again moved the goalposts, and we are capitulating and responding accordingly. This, unfortunately, has been the hallmark of this administration. Let me say that we have consulted and we will support the bill. We do have some concerns, which I will lay out today. Some of them go broader than this bill before us, but speaks to the overall industry issues. This, Mr. Speaker, this bill speaks to the issues of nonprofit companies and segregated account companies with the scope of the legislation, and it seeks to amend language in relation to the requirements and the role of registered agents and the Registrar General. Mr. Speaker, the previous mover of this bill referenced SACs, And I want to point out that SACs can have cells that's used for differing type of investment strategies with absolutely no bearing on shareholding. So there is a bit of concern as I wonder whether some of these aspects go a little too far. On consultation, I am advised that this is a response to the EU, who wants more transparency on all entities. And that's not a problem for us. But the impact in any event will be negligible, as these types of segregated companies are mainly used to manage investment funds, which are already regulated entities. I truly await the day when we bring legislation to this place that is proactive and forward-looking and strategic, rather than reactive and responsive to requirements being dictated to us. 3 years in, I have little confidence that this administration will do any such thing. What I have witnessed, though, and I will speak in some detail to these issues, what I have noticed is incompetence, floundering, and running from pillar to post, snapping to the attention of the big boys under threat, who place us oftentimes on arbitrary gray lists and blacklists. Mr. Speaker, since this administration took office, we have been placed on 4 gray lists or blacklists: France, Netherlands, the FATF, and the EU, who reference some connection to the FATF's concern. I do not celebrate this. I am very concerned about it. And I've often been the one saying to the other side to stop celebrating downgrades and blacklistings. But we are where we are. Now, on October 1st, I am advised that the EU blacklisting on AML comes into effect. We are on that list, I believe, in a gray list form, subject to us completing certain requirements before October 1st, and subject to an inspection by the EU to verify that we have completed such requirements. We are less than 2 weeks away from October 1st. And today I heard no assurances that we have addressed these issues. Today there was no laying on the table of any tracker to ensure that I can tick off the items that have been covered. So I asked the other side for transparency on this issue and to assure the public, the industry, and this House that we have addressed the issues. I do not celebrate it, but I am concerned that there are dark clouds ahead. I am concerned that we continue to be on the radar of the EU. And I am concerned that we don't yet have strategic plans to ensure that we address these issues, benchmarking ourselves against other international financial centers. And I call on this administration to speak to the issue of readiness. Now, I also heard the minister speak about COVID and the impact of COVID on travel. I know the airs of COVID is going to be ringing widely for the next several months, especially as we go into the season. And yeah, COVID's real. But I am advised that the FATF has held virtual plenary sessions, and I am advised that we have been unable to secure the agreement of the FATF to conduct a virtual on-site examination in the Bahamas, where they can verify the completion of the items required by them on this list that ought to be completed, in their view, before October 1st. And yet we come here today, we pass more legislation at the request of the EU. And I wonder whether we got their support as to ensuring or using their influence or persuasion to have the FATF to conduct the virtual on-site examination. And that is the question. In this new normal, we can't say we haven't completed requirements simply because of lack of travel, because this technology, we're basically virtual in most respects. So our inability to have these bodies do a virtual inspection makes me beg the question as to whether we're losing our ground in the world, whether we're losing our influence, whether we have ineffective diplomacy, and whether we are unable to have the EU and other friends encourage the FATF to act appropriately on these issues. So yes, what we need is a plan. We need strategic and effective diplomacy. And for the Bahamas, we must benchmark what we're doing in terms of international financial centers. We have taken multiple trips to the EU. Prime Minister's been, the former Minister of Financial Services has taken a trek across the Atlantic. I believe the Minister of Finance has done so as well. So let me be very clear. And I know this is the political season. So let me be abundantly clear. I take no pleasure in celebrating blacklisting or gray listing or lack of cooperation by the EU or lack of cooperation by the FATF. I take no pleasure in it. I take no pleasure in it. And this is why I've said to your administration over and over to stop celebrating downgrades and blacklistings as you banged on the table over and over and over and over. I personally take no pleasure in this.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama on a point of order.
Speaker, I know the member was not here for the last 5 years of the former administration, but never one day did any member of the opposition bang on any table to celebrate a blacklisting. That would be inaccurate, is wrong, and is malicious. Never. We are all here to support our country and to protect it. So I request him to withdraw it, Mr. Speaker, because it's absolutely incorrect and it's disingenuous. Absolutely. Shameful.
Honorable member for Exomas.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Are you able to substantiate
I,
that?
Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking to this term. Within the last 3 years, within the first 6 months of this administration, in their gusto, repeatedly talking about downgrades and blacklisting and laughing at the top of their voices. I was here. I saw this, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not withdrawing it because I saw it with my own eyes.
Honorable
Mr.
member,
Speaker,
the chair recognizes the honorable member for Grand Bahama, East Grand Bahama.
In the first instance, I want to be clear. I requested that the member withdraw the statement that he made, that the government side celebrated, while in opposition, celebrated the blacklisting of this country by EU or other anti-money laundering terrorists and FATF groups. That's the first thing. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I challenge him again
Honorable member.
to say, to substantiate in this House that the government celebrated the blacklisting of the country under the former administration. I challenge him. Show the facts or withdraw it.
let me say, firstly, that my comments today was not in reference to 8 years ago or 5 years ago. My comments today are in reference to what I observed, my perception of what has happened in the last 3 years. This is what I observed. I am not prepared to withdraw it because this is my perception of what has happened. And it has been regrettable. You've done it over and over.
Honorable members, honorable member, are you able to substantiate the claim that the government side celebrated?
Mr.
I think
Speaker.
that's the operative word.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Celebrated.
It is my view. It is my view. And I stand by it. And I'm not prepared to withdraw it. It is my view. And it has been my perception that in the early days of this administration, that this government and its members
Honorable-
celebrated downgrades.
Honorable members, the chair will rule on it. The chair recognizes East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Speaker, one of the time-held traditions of this House is that we are honorable people, and we are to act honorably. Mr. Speaker, and the member, absolutely, the member is an honorable member. Mr. Speaker, I have put a position. No, I didn't. It's not my view. To challenge the member to either substantiate in either the former administration or as government that this side celebrated any blacklisting or downgrading of this country. Mr. Speaker, you can't come along after the fact, after you make that statement, and then say, in my opinion. It's not honorable, Mr. Speaker. It's not honorable. And I can tell you what's honorable.
Honorable members, honorable member for Exomas.
Please. I know this election season, you know. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Exoma
Oh, please.
and East Grand Bahama.
Please. Please, Mr.
The
Speaker.
chair is about to make a ruling. Honorable members. Honorable member. With respect. Honorable members, with respect to the statement that was made, if we examine Rule 33:17, the chair is of the view that whether it is your opinion or not, you cannot make statements that impute improper motives. That is contrary to the rules. So the ruling of the chair is that the statement with respect to the governing side celebrating blacklisting or gray listings is expunged from the records.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I note your ruling, and I have an obligation on behalf of the people of Exuma and Ragged Island to express my views and to express my observation and to express what I have as perceptions.
Honorable member.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, I am not going to permit you to go down that road
Mr.
because
Speaker.
that going down that road
Speaker.
is a challenge to the ruling
Mr.
of
Speaker,
the chair.
I'm not challenging your ruling.
Well, don't go down that
I'm
road.
not challenging your ruling.
The chair view is that you made an imputation of improper motive that you cannot substantiate. So whether it is your opinion or not, because you represent the people from Ragged Island and Exuma, doesn't give you the privilege to breach the rules. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros.
Mr. Speaker, I was belabored to get up to say something, but I noted the fact also I must join my colleague in noting the fact that there would have been any number of enunciation of how many times the Bahamas would have been blacklisted under the previous administration led by...
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker.
honorable member for Mangrove Key.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying is that... No, Mr. Speaker, what I'm saying...
Honorable
No,
member.
I think the operative word you said is celebration.
Yeah.
But Mr. Speaker,
Imputing improper motive.
the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, I'm not denying your ruling, but I'm saying by the same token, though, Mr. Speaker, for the member not to be able to reference what he would have observed in this parliament is unfair. That's my view.
Honorable member.
And I think that the member should be heard, but I think at the end of the day, to say that these
Honorable
observations were not made
member
by both of us is unfair.
For Mangrove Key, South and Central Andros. The chair is of the view that the words used by the member imputes improper motives, and those motives cannot be substantiated. This has nothing to do with the member's privilege to speak. Yes, honorable member for Exumas.
Mr. Speaker, I accept your ruling as it relates to the word celebration. But the public has heard.
Honorable member,
Mr. Speaker, am I allowed to speak?
you're not allowed to go after
Mr.
the
Speaker.
speaker's ruling.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not speaking to your ruling. I'm expressing my views as a duly elected member of this House in relation to what I hear with my ears. Now, you take an issue with a wording that I said that someone celebrated. Fine, Mr. Speaker. Highlighted. Fine. But I am saying that the other side has highlighted over and over and over, and this is a fact. I'm not making this up. I'm not making it up. Okay? So, Mr. Speaker,
You're trying not to do it to them.
I want to be clear.
Yes, that's all it is.
I want to be clear
Yes,
that I am not celebrating these things. That's the point,
you're highlighting and that's
right? Because we have an obligation to work collectively on the issues that confront us. And this is why I've called. And this is why I've called for the assurances. And I won't be sidetracked with side issues because I've asked for this administration to give us assurances that they have addressed the issues laid out by the EU, the FATF, to ensure that we are not blacklisted on October 1st. That's the crux of the issue.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw on a point of order.
To the member for Exuma and Ragged Island and his assertion that they've asked, they want the government to give assurances. Mr. Speaker, I have in my hand a beautiful photo, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a point of order. It's not a mockery, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member for Mangrove Key.
You're misleading the House.
Honorable member, the member for Yamacraw is on his feet.
Don't get excited, Andros.
Honorable
I'm
member
not
for Mangrove Key.
intimidating, Mr.
this discussion. What the serious discussion?
Honorable member
No,
for Mangrove Key.
Mr. South Andres,
You're not gonna come in and
don't get overly excited.
Honorable member,
Don't get
honorable member for Mangrove Key.
the man get excited.
It is the
I only show
function,
one picture.
it is the function of the chair to determine if a matter is out of order. It is not your role. So, honorable member for Mangrove Key. The member was on his feet. It is not your role to determine whether a matter is out of order in this parliament. Now, you can object, but that is not your role. The member had not even made a point. You are anticipating his debate. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw.
Don't get overly excited. All I was about to say, Mr. Speaker, is that a picture tells 1,000 words. It says the government of the Bahamas, Her Majesty's official opposition, and financial services industry partners in an effort to deal with issues facing the financial services industry. And I wasn't going to speak to the deputy leader, so excited to come. Look at the brilliant smile that he forgot his jacket when we were dealing with the self-same issues, Mr. Speaker, that he raised. We had a meeting attended by the AG, persons from industry, the Attorney General. You have I want to thank God that my cousin is healthy, he's back. I got some things to tell him. The Attorney General, my mentor, the former Attorney General, where we were dealing with the self-same issues. Some persons who are in this picture didn't come back to the meeting, Mr. Speaker. So to say that we were not partnering or attempting to partner with the opposition, don't get excited. This picture tells 1,000 words.
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I will not be intimidated by South Andres. He's my friend and
Honorable members, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Mangrove Key, South and Central Andres.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Yamacraw is a learned barrister. He knows better. He knows the law. He knows the basic protocols of this parliament. And he's abusing the process here this morning with a very serious debate. That's my view, Mr. Speaker, bringing all these other extenuating issues, Mr. Speaker. This member knows better. I mean, we have come here this morning to be very calm. I know it's good to have a little levity, but we've come this morning in a very composed fashion. And to have this member today coming in this very jocular mode, Mr. Speaker, it's not good for what could happen here for the rest of the day in these honored halls. And I'm disappointed in the member for Yamacraw. This is a very serious discussion, and I think we should permit the member for the Exumas and Ragaladan to continue his contribution so that we can go on with the procedure of this house today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the member for East Grand on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, it is, first off, the member for South and Central Andres Mangrove Key has been in this house, I dare say, longer than anybody else in here. He knows well the rules, Mr. Speaker. He knows well the rules. One basic rule that he knows is the member is on a point of order. And as you quite rightly pointed out, he does not have the authority or the right to jump up to stop the member. That is your rule, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, but you should. You should so you can learn. So, Mr. Speaker, the member, if he has a point of order, he waits for the member to state his point, and then he can make his point. As I just did, waiting for him to finish his point. This is a house of rules. This is an order. This is not the bar room where you jump up and make whatever noise. This ain't that.
Thank you.
And nobody can bully nobody in here.
Thank you.
No matter how loud you shout. Now, Mr. Speaker, the point that the member was making is that there was consultation. That was his point of order.
Yes.
And it is a substantial point of order. That isn't jocular or making a mockery. That is a point. It's a valid point.
Thank you, honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exumas.
Mr. Speaker,
Margaret Island.
Mr. Speaker, we are a nation with incredible issues. We are a nation in crisis.
Honorable member, just a moment. Honorable member, the chair recognizes the member for Yamacraw on a point of order?
yes, sir.
Or point of privilege?
Yes, he insulted my integrity by calling into question my character as an unprofession.
Yeah.
And I cannot accept that.
No.
I simply rise to say that a picture tells 1,000 words. Now, Mr. Speaker, please allow me to demonstrate the precision of my incision into the argument presented by Exuma.
This isn't a
Please, Mr. Speaker. I want to be able to do that because he called into question.
Honorable member.
He called into question.
Let me hear the member.
Mr. Speaker, he said that shortly thereafter, this government was celebrating the whole fact of downgrades. But here, and there was no, and he also iterated that there was no consultation. He's calling on you said you're calling on the government to explain certain things, but they were at the table when they refused to come, and there we were explaining everything, Mr. Speaker. And this is not trivial. South Andrews knows that over and over again we use these specific. But you know what this picture tells? This picture highlights the level of integrity of this government, that we have reached out not only to Exuma, who came without his jacket and we loaned him one, but to the industry.
Honorable member.
But I take exception to South Andrews, Mr. Speaker, insulting me in that way. I will never do that, but I forgive him. I'm not going to turn another cheek, but I forgive him.
You recognize the honorable member for the Exumas
Mr. Speaker,
on Ragged Island.
we are confronting serious national crisis. We are confronting serious issues in our financial services industry. I'm not going to be distracted with trivial issues. I am not going to be talked over with lectures on what a point of order might be, Mr. Speaker. What I will do, though, is I will say to this administration that these are serious times in our country. We are confronting serious national issues, and we ask that you focus on them. No time today I spoke about consultation, but I asked that there be transparency as it relates to whether we have cleared the issues that we have been asked to clear before October 1st. I have asked that there be transparency and a laying of the table of the tracking document that demonstrates whether we have cleared the issues, because I suspect that we are on the radar of the EU. I am hopeful that on October 1st, will not find us confirmed on a blacklist by the EU, but yet some may take this as a light issue. Let me explain the significant consequences of being blacklisted, since some seem to wish to deflect. If we continue to have these issues, we will have corresponding banking challenges. This has already started. If we continue these issues, we will have challenges transacting business with the EU. If we continue these issues, we will be asked to have enhanced due diligence requirements for entities operating in our country. If we continue these issues, we will continue to have jurisdictional perception problems. So listen, when I come here to speak on these issues, I speak as a nationalist. I speak as a member who has benefited from the financial services industry. I speak as opposition spokesman for financial services on behalf of the hundreds and thousands of middle-class Bahamians who earn a good living in this industry. I do not trivialize these issues, and I won't be distracted. I will speak without fear, and I will speak to the issues confronting our country today. That's what I came here for, and that is what I will do. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. I don't come here today asking about borrowing a jacket and showing up a photo and talking about old nursery rhyme stories. I am talking about how we can pivot the financial services industry. These are serious times. Serious times calls for serious debate and serious discussion, serious engagement, serious transparency. And this is why I asked for documents to be laid to show that we are working in line with what we're being asked to do. Simple. Now we must pivot. And how do we pivot? We must build strategic linkages proactively secured by diplomacy. We need to firstly continue the creating of substance in the Bahamas with headquartering and home office business where professionals are engaged here. We must modernize our residency by investment programs to ensure competitiveness. We must benchmark our industry against international financial centers around the world to ensure that we are competitive. We must do more than pay lip service to the ease of doing business. If we are to have success in this business, we still have shoddy and unreliable power supply even after hundreds of millions in proclaimed investments. This is an issue for the industry. We still have unreliable internet service by our two major providers. It could mean millions in lost revenues to companies working in this business. They need high-end video conferencing and data connectivity to do international business. But COVID has laid bare the reality that basic, reliable internet is a problem even for virtual schooling in our country in 2020. And I feel the wrath of my 10-year-old who tells me that my internet at our house is trash. Trash, he says. Imagine now real players in this business who want a video conference, who need strong data connectivity. These are the issues that confront us. And these are the issues that we must address. Mr. Speaker, we can do better as a country, and we must do better as a country. Doing better is not just important for financial service and business. It's important for our way of life. And therefore, we must ensure that what we are promised as consumers in this country, that we receive, it's delivered as promised with the consistency level and the speed in this particular case as required. And we must call on IRCA to ensure that utility providers in this country are providing the quality of service they promise. That's what we must do. These are the issues that confront us as a nation. These are the issues that we must come here and address. Today, Mr. Speaker, we have multiple agencies required for approval purposes. And I understand that regulated entities are still required to be approved by the National Economic Council. I don't understand for the life of me why this would be the case, given that there are competent regulators in our country. We must look to streamline this. We must look to ensure perhaps that the NEC is meeting more regularly to ensure that these regulated entities are not stuck in the bottleneck of bureaucracy. These are some quick wins that we can focus on. So if you want to consult with me, I will give you good ideas to how we advance our country, how we move the needle, how we slash bureaucracy, how we make it easier to do business. That's what I'm about. That's what I'd like to talk to you about, Mr. Speaker. developers, and there's a notion, there's a misinformation being spread by the member for Yamacraw that somehow we have been invited to meetings and didn't attend. It's untrue. It's blatantly untrue. This member, who is the opposition spokesman for financial services,
The chair
has
recognizes
never been
Yamamoto
invited to
on
a
a point of order.
consultation meeting that I did not attend.
I can get with the Attorney General. There were meetings that were set, and I was there when it was scheduled to be held. The first, I think one of the first meetings when the picture that I showed that I had underneath my desk, where, as I said before, he didn't come with a jacket. We loaned him a jacket. And you can ask the Attorney General, we had set the meetings were set and persons did not turn up. When we had the meeting, senior members from the Attorney General's office, and I have the other pictures, I didn't bring all, who came to the meeting from per agency, and asked the AG,
Honorable member.
asked
for
the AG.
example, That word.
And when the leader for the opposition comes, I've raised it with him before about the meeting, the follow-up meeting. And there's always been an extension for persons to come and be a part of the meeting to deal with the issues relating to financial services. And unless he can substantiate that I'm alive, he must take it back. I have evidence that he was there. He spoke earlier about the government answering questions for him. And I simply said, if you were part of these, you would know what we're doing. And then I said, while I was on my seat, this is a small society. He knows all the players. He knows the CEO for BFSB, AIBT, and the work that they're doing. The National Recovery Committee and what we're doing with that. He knows it.
Honorable members.
So to come and suggest he must withdraw that, Mr. Speaker. Why would I lie on him?
Honorable members.
Why would I lie?
Honorable members.
Ross, I expect better from you.
Honorable members.
There's certain language you don't use.
Resume your seat for a moment.
I'm withdrawing the word lie.
Honorable members. Honorable members. Both members. We all know, honorable members, that there are certain prohibited words. We made reference to that. Honorable member, resume your seat. Resume your seat, honorable member.
Mr. Speaker, I represent myself, my family, and my mom, and I will not allow anybody to treat me that way.
Honorable members,
I feel that discourteous to me. I represent Yamamuro.
I'm going to make a ruling.
My reputation is important to me.
I'm going to make a ruling. Honorable members, I'm going to make a ruling on the matter.
To him, and I won't do it to anybody else. And my children watch this.
Okay, honorable member, thank you. Honorable members. This is regrettable that we have arrived at this point. But honorable members, we are fully aware. We had this discussion in June and in July with respect to certain words that should not and are prohibited. And the word that was used by both members shouting across the floor, I can hear the word in ZNS telecast. The broadcast picks up those words that are shouted across the floor. So the word lie shouted across the floor by the member for the Exumas and Ragged Island, and the word lie in response, we're going to expunge that word from the record. And while I am on dealing with these rules, I'm honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island. I'm going to read this rule because I heard you use a word after I made a ruling. I'm going to read the rule first. The rule says this, 838.3. Look it up. A member shall not dissent from a ruling by the speaker or the chairman except by substantive motion for that purpose. In other words, you don't get to your feet or on your seat and shout out that you loathe the decision of the chair. Now, that's what you did. So the ruling of the chair is that the word loathe used by the member for Exuma. You used the word. I wrote it down when you used it. And I will produce the evidence for it, but before I produce the evidence, the word loaf used by the member for Exuma and Ragged Island with respect to the speaker's ruling on the point of order is hereby expunged from the record. The chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas and Ragged Island.
Mr. Speaker, it is, let me say this, Mr. Speaker, before I continue. I have no recollection of using that word, Mr. Speaker. But
doesn't mean that you didn't say it because you don't have the recollection.
I do not have the recollection of using it. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, before the member stood on his feet, I made the point that at no time was this member invited to a consultation meeting on these issues where I did not attend. I have been invited to the meeting, and I did attend as the member continues to hold up this photo that he's had for 3 years, perhaps. That's okay, he loves the photo. But do not say that you invite the opposition for consultation and we did not accept. That is completely wrong, and it's untrue, Mr. Speaker. We are confronted with serious national issues in our country. And I want to focus.
Let the matter die.
I want to focus. That is untrue. It's untrue. It's untrue. Yes.
Are you on a point of order,
untrue.
honorable member? The chair recognizes the chair.
And I know
The chair recognizes the honorable member. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Yamacraw. On a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. You said, and I commend you for your ruling. And now the honorable member is saying that he doesn't recall, meaning that his memory might have failed him. Meaning that he doesn't recall, his memory might have failed him. And now he's saying it's untrue. Two different things, Mr. Speaker. And so I'm going to say to him that what he's saying is untrue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable members.
Speaker, we are confronted with serious national crisis in our country. And I come here to focus on these serious national issues, Mr. Speaker. And I am determined not to be sidetracked with issues that does not move the needle for the Bahamian people. And I take this oath seriously. The people of Exuma and Ragged Island expect that I will represent them appropriately and speak to the issues before us. And this is what I will do, without fear or favor, Mr. Speaker. I made the point that there is too much bureaucracy in the system. I made the point that there are regulated entities that apply for applications that still sits in the NEC. And I've asked for this process to be streamlined. I've asked for NEC meetings to happen more frequently to ensure that business get done in this country more smoothly, less bureaucratically, Mr. Speaker. There can be no expediting of approvals without such meetings. The same apply to foreign direct investments. And we have developers today crying about not being able to get approvals as we face these serious crises. Developers all across the country talking about how they cannot get requisite approvals to move developments forward, to create jobs, to spur economic activity at a time we need it most. So I don't come here to talk about a photo where we agreed that we had consultation at that meeting. Not here to talk about that. I'm talking about moving beyond paying lip service to the issue of ease of doing business. That's what I'm talking about. We do not operate in isolation. Far from it. We don't operate in isolation. So when there's bureaucratic slowness, we're not the only game in town. Clients will automatically redirect to Cayman Islands or somewhere else. So we must get the government and its inefficiencies out of the way of doing business. We keep hearing of promises to facilitate this, but it's been 3 years of this administration's promises, and here we are. We recommended on April 10th in our economic plan a massive spending on digitization. The tax haven business is dying quickly and brick and mortar type businesses are thinning out. We must pivot with reg tech and super tech for automating approvals. We must pivot with fintech and insure tech to compete globally. What we need is a government that is proactive on these matters and is working in harmony with the industry. That's what we need. What we need is a strategy and a blueprint for the industry from this administration. That's what we need. But I suppose we'll have to do that ourselves when we come to government. But at least I hear it's going to be soon. And we hope so. Because there's a lot of work to do to move the needle on these industries in this country. What we do know is that your policies have not worked. We see little ingenuity, and you have not been able to move the needle one iota in this industry. So as far as the amendments go, I also see some missed opportunities. For starters, the Substantive Act still includes in its definition of beneficial owner all persons who might control an entity without any distinction. This flaw inadvertently captures those who are not truly beneficial owners in any sense of the term, such as liquidators, receivers, administrators, executors, etc. In other words, those who may have legal control of an entity but no beneficial ownership interest. This is perhaps a missed opportunity in my view. Another missed opportunity is that in the Act, liability can be civil or criminal with jail time for offenses. And whilst we want to be known as a strict, well-regulated industry, and whilst we want the legislation to have teeth, we don't want ourselves to be uncompetitive with the rest of the world. So in Turks and Caicos, you must reveal beneficial ownership information. However, if you miss a deadline to do this in the Bahamas, you face jail time. If you miss a deadline in Turks and Caicos, the penalty is financial and not jail. So I'm speaking with a financial services company in the Bahamas, and I'm told I'd go to jail if I miss a deadline. Things happen sometimes. We miss deadlines sometimes. Then I'm going to look for a jurisdiction, perhaps the Turks and Caicos, if this is a matter that concerns me. This very well could result in someone sending their business to other jurisdictions. So we must look at these things. We must make sure that we understand the comparative analysis between what we do in our industry and our country compared with our counterparts. Turks and Caicos passed their bill 1 year after us. And they apparently learned from our mistake. And this is what we must do. We could have addressed this today, but we're not doing that. We much prefer to talk about things that don't matter to the industry. We could have addressed it today, and there is, in fact, opportunity. I keep reiterating that financial services industry is all about competitive edge. We should not give any other industry, we should not give any other jurisdiction an edge over us. When we are debating these bills, when we debated them 2 years ago, I stressed that we must ensure that what we are doing all we can to be compliant, but not make ourselves less competitive than Cayman or the BVI. Perhaps there can be more research, perhaps there can be more comparisons of what our competitors are doing so we keep that competitive edge. Perhaps there can be more familiarity as to what are in these bills themselves, Mr. Speaker. By the way, Mr. Speaker, the elephant in the room today is the issue of possible hacks. That's the elephant in the room. There was already at least one hack of a registry, Bahamas Registrar General's system. Not this one, but another one. And quite frankly, it sent chills down my spine. The fact that it happened and the fact that we weren't told about it for some, perhaps 6 months, concerned me. We were told that there would be an investigation into the hack, but we have yet to hear the results of that investigation. I am now interested in hearing also the results of that investigation. Thankfully, the database of beneficial owners itself was not hacked, as I mentioned before. An electronic database of beneficial owners of all entity in the Bahamas is a powerful one, and it goes to the core of the privacy we offer. Cybersecurity is only mentioned superficially. These amendments should have addressed data breaches, hacking, and other serious concerns related to a register like this. So I have to ask, because I don't know, what have we done to strengthen those systems to avoid the recurrence that we saw?
Chair recognizes the honourable member for East Grand Bahama.
Yeah,
On a point of order.
Yes, I'm not exactly sure where the member is trying to go with this. I think it is loose talk, but in the Beneficial Ownership Registry Act, Register of Beneficial Ownership Act, it speaks to the privacy of data. That is specifically included in the bill. Maybe the member would want to have reference to that act, so that he can familiarize himself as it relates to cybersecurity. Mr. Speaker, we are fully aware of the risk that the digital environment creates. And as the rest of the world, put more and more of our transactions and store more and more data in the cloud, in our backup servers, there's more and more risk that there can be these data breaches. I want to assure the member and the Bahamian people that the Department of Digital Transformation, that they have this matter fully in hand. In fact, there is a project now to engage a cybersecurity expert to do a total overview of government data security, to ensure that we update, to ensure that we do and modernize the software, to ensure that we give ourselves the best possible defense against this type of hacking. With respect to the Register of Beneficial Ownership itself, it is offline. So you really can't hack it. So again, maybe the member would want to read the act and familiarize himself.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, it's laughable that this member would talk about loose talk. Speaker, I go back to the issue of us confronting serious national crisis in our country and in this industry. We've been hacked. We've come with not the Register of Beneficial Owners, another system. Don't speak for me. Don't speak for me. Mr. Speaker, I have the floor.
Honourable
At the
members.
floor. At the floor. You don't speak for me. I speak for me.
Honourable members.
I speak for me.
On a point of order.
Yeah, but don't tell me what to say. I speak for me.
With the greatest of respect, the member seems to have a little issue controlling his temper, dealing with the debate.
Honorable member.
Will you please ask the member to withdraw?
Withdraw what?
Want to see temper? You continue on the condescending path, you're going and you will see temper.
What does that mean?
We're not here to lose talk.
What does that mean?
Honorable member.
To lose talk.
Honorable member for Exomas and East Grand Bahama.
We're not having that in here today.
Honorable member.
Member Pasada, I'm just talking
The-
to you about that last week.
On the point of personal reflection, personal reflections, that's a breach of the rule. Personal reflection.
Mr. Speaker,
Withdrawing.
with the on the
Withdrawing.
point of personal privilege,
Withdrawing.
it appears that the member is upset. I don't know why he's upset. But I think it again, we are a house of rules, Mr. Speaker,
You abide by them.
and we are an honorable house. We ought to treat each other with the courtesy and the respect that this place, this level that the Bahamian people have elevated us. Respect the house, even if you don't respect me. Respect the house. You can't come and threaten people. What could happen if you keep going? What does that mean? What are you saying to people out there in listening audience? What are you saying to them?
Honorable member.
We have a responsibility. We have a responsibility in this house.
Thank you, honorable member.
This member, Mr. Speaker, has been consistently condescending to refer to my representations and concerns as it relates to the financial services industry as loose talk, Mr. Speaker, is completely condescending. I asked him to withdraw it, Mr. Speaker, right? And then he stands and he wants to lecture us on what is honorable and what should be done. The public sees you in full flight every day,
Honorable
Mr.
members.
Speaker.
Honorable members.
Do I-
Honorable members.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I thought I had the floor.
We want to put an end to this discourse. Honorable member, I'm recognizing the chair for the member for East Grand Bahama. We don't want to belabor this discussion and this exchange any further. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama on this matter, and then honorable member for Exuma, you may
I
proceed.
just wanted to make the point that when I said loose talk, not
Honorable members,
talking about his intervention with respect to the debate. What I am speaking to though is his statement with respect to cybersecurity, the state of the government's intervention and protection of the database. I think that it's important, Mr. Speaker, that the public knows and has the confidence that the government is, in view of the issue, has the matter in hand and is being active in respect to upgrading and ensuring that we do what we can to protect the information as we put more and more services online.
thank you, honorable members. Honorable members, please.
Speaker,
With respect to the rule, please do not proceed along the line of personal reflection.
Speaker, we are a nation facing serious national crisis. Serious times in the financial services industry. My interventions here are very serious. They're designed to be helpful. I come here to put concerns as it relates to the industry, as it relates to financial services professionals, and as it relates to what we do as a country to be compliant, to be a well-regulated jurisdiction. And it is regrettable that we seek to deflect from these important issues. I accept the members' assurance that we have addressed or are addressing the issues. However, I make the point that an incident occurred. We were promised an investigation. We didn't hear the results on those investigations. A hack did occur. That's fact. The AG confirmed it. He blamed the PLP too, by the way. But I ain't going there today because that's loose talk. What I'm saying right now, Mr. Speaker, if we're making upgrades, if we are satisfied that our systems are airtight and we are defending against cyber security, don't hide it under the bushel. Share it with the world. Let the world know what we're doing to ensure that we keep our financial services industry intact. We heard, Mr. Speaker, of these types of incidences of becoming common in international financial services centers, and we want to ensure that we do not have any such recurrence in the Bahamas. So we want to know that there is a budget. We want to know that there's project plan for the essential upgrades. That's what we want to know. And as I said 2 years ago, there are many locally and internationally involved with this industry who are very concerned. We must inspire confidence on these issues by speaking to the issues that they are concerned about, Mr. Speaker. And I can't say it no more clearly than that. If we experience such breaches, it would be catastrophic, Mr. Speaker. And I don't want the minister to take comfort that a system that is not online cannot be breached. That would be most naive, Mr. Speaker. And I believe it's not what he intended. But he intended perhaps to say that this is an issue that we have in our sights. And I hope we intended to say that we spent money on the upgrades, Mr. Speaker, and we are concerned deeply about these issues. That is what the industry wished to hear. That is what the world needs to know. We must take bold steps in pivoting this industry to safeguard the remaining high-end jobs in the middle class. That's what we must do. And frankly, I don't get a sense of the proactive type legislation being brought to this parliament to do that. It's much like what we see in other segments of this administration, Mr. Speaker. But that's a story for another debate. I am grateful of every opportunity I have to speak on behalf of the people of Exuma and Ragged Island. I thank them for their love and support. I assure them of the same, and I assure them that I will endeavor to continue to serve them with diligence. I will endeavor to continue to speak boldly and fearlessly on their behalf. That's why they sent me here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many, Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for South Beach.
Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to please provide a clarification to a comment made by the Honorable Member for the Exumas and Ragged Island with regard to virtual schooling and the capability of the internet service providers ensuring that the schooling will have the requisite capacity. And he made a point that is very important, and if I may, just to give some clarification to it. We have received at the Ministry of Education many complaints by even some private institutions and homeowners about the sufficiency, the adequacy of internet capability, which we as a ministry have taken up with the internet service providers, well known to us. Only to discover, Mr. Speaker, that those institutions and or homes with their private service may not have the capacity to accommodate the new reality in which they live. Has nothing to do with the capability of the service providers, but the service that is being contracted within a home. For instance, if ordinarily, and I don't know the terminology, but if ordinarily you were only getting 5 bits into your home because that was adequate for the service that was necessary then, and now your child is on a virtual platform in which there's live streaming for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours per day, then that 5 bits would be insufficient. It has nothing to do with the internet service provider, but rather the quantity of service that you have contracted. So what we have encouraged persons to do is to contact their service provider and have them do an assessment of the service that they have and see if in the new reality it is adequate to meet their demand.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Exomas.
Mr. Speaker, I'm always grateful for the intervention of the member for South Beach as he speaks to these important issues. I would wish to share the member's optimism, but I would caution the member to perhaps in some pockets of the country, perhaps some pockets of New Providence, that we temper the optimism, because I've studied the issue. I'm satisfied that there are some concerns in some areas. I by no means seek to disparage any provider. I'm simply saying that the issue exists in 2020, and we must work together to resolve the issues. I'm grateful for the intervention of the minister.
Sure.
Speaker, I am also grateful to the member, and that is a matter we will take under serious and active advisement.
Thank you, Honorable Members. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Golden Gate.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order. Mr. Speaker, I really did not want to interrupt the honorable member while he was on his feet, particularly so early in his presentation. But soon after the honorable member commenced, in my view, he misled this parliament and he misled the Bahamian people when he used the phrase that this government capitulated to international agencies, which this government has been doing. Now, the honorable member is fully aware, Mr. Speaker, that these issues have been thorny issues for the Bahamas for at least 2 decades now. The reality of it, Mr. Speaker, is that the F&M government in 2000 passed a compendium of bills to deal with blacklisting. And Mr. Speaker, we've been dealing with them ever since. The Free National Movement governments, the PLP governments. There's no capitulation here. There's absolutely none. There is none, Mr. Speaker. We have a situation where, as he said, as he spoke to, the moving of the goalpost. We all are aware that the goalpost has constantly been moving, and to respond to that move and to describe such a response as capitulation, Mr. Speaker, that is misleading. That is entirely misleading, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I would respectfully ask the honorable member, perhaps a better word might have been used, because I don't think he really intended to suggest what is suggested by that word, in suggesting that in some way the government, this government, has not been responding in a proper way, or in a way that was not in the best interest of the Bahamas and the Bahamian people. And I don't think he meant to suggest that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for the Exomas and Ragged Island.
I did use the word capitulate, but I wish not for the member to put words in my mouth. He made some reference at the end about not making decisions in the interest of the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, the opposition have been completely transparent and responsible in its views on these issues. We have supported most, if not all, of the financial services legislation brought to Parliament. We understand that we are a country in crisis. We understand the financial services industry is in crisis. We are responsible in our interventions. I go to great lengths to provide objective suggestions as to what we must do. So if the word is perceived by the member to be offensive, let me assure you, Mr. Speaker, that the opposition stands ready to continue to work along with the government as we have on these pieces of legislation to make them better, to improve them, to be a compliant jurisdiction, and that's what we are about. We are concerned about certain things. I've expressed them very clearly, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, I rest on that point.
If the opposition does not agree with the government in the government's approach, or they believe the government ought to deal with something differently, if the government does not do that, that is not capitulation, respectfully, sir. It is not. And I just wanted to be clear to the Bayman people that this government at all times has worked in the best interests of themselves, and each and every one of them, and indeed this country. And every financial services provider and everyone in the industry knows quite well the thorny issues of blacklisting. Everyone knows. And I frankly, I'm a little disappointed that the honorable member who's acknowledged that in fact he did use a word, as I said, would not perhaps use a word that's more appropriate, having regard to the explanation he just gave. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for the Exumas.
Mr. Speaker, I said what I said. The opposition, in a very sober, objective way, go to great lengths to try to make these bills better. We understand that this industry is in crisis. We understand our country is in crisis. We are here as elected officials to ensure that we do what's in best interest of the country. If the member perceives a word to be harsh, then I believe, Mr. Speaker, I want him to reflect on the intent of what our interventions are to make these bills better and to be a compliant jurisdiction. That's what we're about.
Chair recognizes the honorable member for Centerville.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Centerville thinks that, of course, the suggested amendments, we expected that the goalposts would move and expected the amendments to take the form that they did. So we do appreciate the amendments. We do appreciate that we must meet our international obligations. I'd like to approach my brief comments today on a local level, Mr. Speaker, as we look forward to your anniversary, recognizing, of course, the importance of, and when I say your anniversary of the House of Assembly, recognizing the importance of democracy. When I think, Mr. Speaker, of beneficial ownership or any type of ownership, you know, I think of the people of the Bahamas and the people of Centerville, many who, of course, are renting, so they do not own their homes. And we have many Bahamians who are renting. We actually have quite a number of persons that are homeless. And homelessness has become an issue in the Centerville constituency and in the Bahamas at large. Many of us have cars we don't own. So what do we own is the question. And what does the Bahamas beneficially own? Good morning, honorable members, and of course, good morning to the Bahamas. And as we all can tell, Mr. Speaker, from the political shenanigans of today, as well as what has been going on over the past weekend, that this is carrot time. As a matter of fact, it's the dangling of the carrot time. Dangling the carrot, Mr. Speaker, has replaced the silly season. It's no longer the silly season. It's the dangling of the carrot season. Party politics, Mr. Speaker, is very good at dangling the carrot. And the can of corned beef that Cat Island had here for the past, I think, 2 years, I thought it would be appropriate for me no, I have my own carrot. I think it's important for me to show that this is what this season is all about. This is what this season is all about for political career persons or people who believe that they would like to be a part of this political class, that in itself is systemic. But I just want the people of the Bahamas to know that this is the dangling of the carrot season. Mr. Speaker, knowing quite well that nothing of sustenance happens at the end of the day, we will give you a taxi plate, or we will give you a job. We'll make you a senator. We'll give you some crown land. Dangle, 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 Mr. Speaker. Carrot, carrot, carrot. My presentation today, Mr. Speaker, is titled Dangling the Carrot, and this is only part 1, because I have part 2 after lunch. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because it is always a privilege for me to serve and to represent the people of the Centerville community, and by inclusion, the people of the Farm Road area, which forms part of the Centerville constituency. And by extension, Mr. Speaker, I can only hope that the efforts of Centerville will forever embrace a spirit of education, resilience, and national development. Today, I rise to participate in a debate on the Register of Beneficial Ownership Amendment Bill. The objectives and reasons, Mr. Speaker, for the original register was to identify and register beneficial owners of companies and organizations for purpose of meeting our international obligations. The amendment, however, speaks to the inclusion of nonprofit organizations, segregated accounts companies, as well as registered agents' responsibilities. The pressure, Mr. Speaker, to bring such a bill to our parliament takes many forms. There are the G20 countries, the OECD, the FATF, the CFATF. A part of this model as well would be the EU Code of Conduct group, which continues, as we know, to move the goalpost as we attempt to comply. I would first like to thank regulators, the Securities Commission of the Bahamas, Financial Intelligence Unit, Compliance Commission, all of you for meeting your obligations to this House. This has serious repercussions in our international negotiations. Mr. Speaker, the world knows, inclusive of the IDB, the OECD, and the EU, and other international stakeholders, when we ourselves are not complying with our own obligations, or when we are not following our own laws. The Compliance Commission, another significant organization in our negotiations on the world stage. We as politicians and legislators must understand the international importance of filling certain key positions, the importance of certain types of qualifications, and the impact of parliamentary reporting delays on the decisions of international bodies such as OECD and the FATF. It has always amazed me, Mr. Speaker, how our international colleagues knew more about our boards and their capacity and their completeness more than we do. Without these organizations and their mandates, Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas would remain on a blacklist. Without their commitment to national and international compliance, politicians would have no basis for negotiations. So to those agencies who comply with their statutory commitment to this House, we applaud you. Centerville applauds you. Your timely submissions help to bridge the gap between enlightenment and the political art of benightedness. Notwithstanding the above, however, Mr. Speaker, the legal obligation of the budget assessment of your Fiscal Responsibility Council remains outstanding. We continue to allow numerous key roles, such as the country's Surveyor General, the country's Financial Secretary, permanent secretaries, directors, commissioners to sit in the capacity of acting. I do believe there's a timeline in which one can act or should act in these positions. Why do we have these acting positions? More than 1 year, 2 years, and even 3? These are legally binding positions, full responsibility and full liability within the ambit of the law. There needs to be a full review of acting appointments. It all reflects on our stability and compliance ratings. The executive branch of government should pay attention as it leaves room for irresponsibility, non-accountability, and non-compliance. The issue of beneficial ownership, Mr. Speaker, the registry that is, has been talked around financial services sector for around 15 years. Many other countries have opted to proceed. Today, the Bahamas finds itself in that position. I always wondered if the delay in passing necessary legislation was in itself a strategy, or simply a we don't know what to do yet strategy. Time and time again, Mr. Speaker, successive administrations have waited for the last hour to use the necessary resources to make constructive, necessary decisions, hence a lack of planning for future generations. In financial services, Mr. Speaker, we all seem to know what will eventually happen. But what is the action plan to fix it? What are our long-term goals, Mr. Speaker, for the second pillar of our economy? Our middle class, Mr. Speaker, is eroding very quickly. Many may say, well, what are your plans? Well, my dreams for the financial services sector, Mr. Speaker, has not changed. I see a sector modified and driven by Bahamians, owned by Bahamians. I see a vibrant capital markets approach to national and economic development. I see Bahamian specialists, Mr. Speaker, in financial and corporate service provision. I see Bahamian specialists in domestic and international banking and investment services. Yes, that's what I see. I actually see politicians, Mr. Speaker, more seasoned in their respective authorities rather than seasoned in the art of political savvy. Meritocracy, Mr. Speaker, above loyalty, hence country above self. Just jobs will not cut it for the future of the Bahamas. Our people need careers. Careers are sustainable. Careers seizes opportunities. Careers build nations. Yes, jobs add value, but it's in the nature of that employment that builds careers and drives our economy. We must put more emphasis on our immigration policy and ensuring that our people are trained. We must consider what it looks like when the international world wants us to maintain a register of beneficial ownership when we have been and are challenged maintaining our own. Time and time again, Mr. Speaker, you would go to the registrar's office and there are missing documents. I wouldn't speak about the missing companies, the information for missing companies and corporations. The problem, Mr. Speaker, is that many of these companies that are there or that have been moved off of the register, in many cases, in my opinion, were created to steal the very birthright of the Bahamian people. Companies formed to quiet acreage of land now cannot be found in our registrar. Yet the so-called current owners of such land claim documentary title. But yet, Mr. Speaker, the young man from Centerville who buys a stolen TV, unbeknown or known to him, ends up in jail. We have a lot of work to do, Mr. Speaker, to get our country back. There are some wrongs, Mr. Speaker, that need to be corrected, but there are also some good and some freedoms that need to be exonerated. So when we talk about maintaining a register of beneficial owners, Mr. Speaker, the world is watching. I support the amendment. However, the bill should be extended to all companies, not just international companies. We need our own register in order to preserve, protect, and promote what is Bahamian and what belongs to us. I continue to look for the much anticipated land registry. Mr. Speaker, the land registry bill was tabled in this House in 2010. We have come to understand by now, Mr. Speaker, that tabling a bill does not mean it is debated and or passed. To me, tabling a bill has become a political perception, agenda, when there may be absolutely no intention of you even moving forward with it. We are looking forward, by the way, Mr. Speaker, to the procurement bill that was tabled.
Honorable member, I have to stop you.
Okay.
That assertion you just made, that is implying improper motives. You are suggesting that the government is tabling bills that they have no intention to proceed with. Now, of course, that may be the case at the end of the day, but you cannot imply that improper motive.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that your intervention, and I think that
I would like you to withdraw that.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable withdraws that in terms of the way you would have presented it just now. I mean, for me, I just think that the history, you've seen a lot of bills come forward and never, they've just been laid, but not followed through. So we just look forward to seeing whether or not. Thank you. But parties, Mr. Speaker, have left many bills on the table which haven't seen the light of day, but making us both parties have left many bills on the table which haven't seen the light of day. That's another form, Mr. Speaker, of dangling the carrot. Didn't you want a land registry bill? Didn't you want a fiscal responsibility bill? Didn't you all want the fishing legislation? Didn't you all want a procurement bill? Just dangling carrots, Mr. Speaker. I always wondered how legal or how constitutional was the ratification of 50% of our register of companies. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to address a few Centerville housekeeping matters. Your notice of motions, Mr. Speaker, which seems to include all open items, inclusive of bills tabled. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'll just repeat that so that you could hear, because it has something to do with your position, your authority. Your notice of motions, Mr. Speaker, which seems to include all open items, inclusive of bills tabled, unanswered questions, notice of select committees. However, there's no indication of unanswered petitions. May I suggest, in the interest of order, that unanswered petitions by our people are also included on your notice of meetings. Mr. Speaker, Centerville would have asked for the heads of agreement for the port deal and the landfill deal for more than 2 years now, and a full copy has not been forthcoming.
Just a moment. The chair recognizes the honorable member for Golden Gate.
Mr. Speaker, yes, I rise on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is trite in the House, it is trite to say that when we rise to speak on a matter, on a debate of a bill, we are to rise to speak on the bill. That's before the House, sir. Rule 33.4 says a member may speak on any question which is before the House or committee for debate. Our discussions are limited to matters for debate. That is trite. That is understood by everybody. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member, for some time now, has been speaking on matters totally unrelated to the debate, to the beneficial owners amendment, and with absolutely no regard. And I do understand, Mr. Speaker, that at times you may be on the periphery of it, you may be tangentially connected, but Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, respectfully, the member's far removed, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator Bill.
Mr. Speaker, Centerville continues to ask for a report of the Public Accounts Committee, your Public Treasury Committee, and the House Rules Committee. Centerville note that you would have established yet another committee known as the Constituency Commission. No doubt, we expect that report within its legal time frame. I did recall at some point, Mr. Speaker, that the Prime Minister indicated there would be no boundary changes. However, we will wait and see. Most importantly, the Haymans would be able, through these public reporting facilities, to identify their concessions. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, you were saying something?
Go. Honorable member, continue.
Okay. So, Mr. Speaker, with regards to the beneficial register of beneficial owners, I think I would have indicated initially that, the issues that were amended, Centerville has no issues with that. Centerville has no issues with non-profit organizations being included or segregating accounts companies being included. For many years, Mr. Speaker, commercial enterprises would have been given tax incentives, exemptions, and concessions that some Bahamian people could never quantify. In my opinion, due to the lack of transparency in heads of agreements and no requirement for substantive reporting. Mr. Speaker, though I can appreciate the amendment, Centerville begged leave just to touch on.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town on a point of order.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, we don't seek to belabor the member's contribution, but I think we'd want it on the record because we do not want folks to believe that the Speaker of the House has established some new committee, which you have not done. The member has spoken to some constituency committee. It is not the Constituency Committee. According to Article 68 of the Constitution, Article 69 actually calls for the Constituencies Commission, which Bahamians would know in traditional language as the Boundaries Commission that determines the delineation of our constituency. So the member, I think the House should be corrected in that regard because you have not established some new committee.
Thank you, honorable member.
Thank you.
Don't cut out a seat.
Leader Bamboo Town, thank you very much. I mean, it's always good to get clarification. What's important to me is that the Bahamian people are properly informed. And if that's what you call it, that's what you
No, honorable member.
That's what it is.
Honorable member, the Constitution establishes a Constituencies Commission.
Thank you.
Article 69.
Thank you very much. We look forward to the report. So, Mr. Speaker, I will just continue with some of the concerns from the outside that I think is important to our to this particular debate. Mr. Speaker, there was a town hall meeting that was planned, I guess for town planning, to complete the application process for Nassau Port. And I would have attended that meeting some time ago, but no one showed up. I was the only one there. And then I saw a notice reflecting that another meeting will be held on October 5th. However,
Just a moment. The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama on a point of order.
I don't want to certainly deny the member an opportunity to hear the point that he wants to make, but maybe that's better in the afternoon session. We have a very tight schedule, as you can tell. We are running into the lunch break, and we want to get this part over with. So the point that I want to raise is relevant. We can stick to the debate of the bill that's before us. That would help us to be efficient so that we can get through this and get through the day on schedule.
Mr. Speaker, you know, I could appreciate what the member is saying when he refers to relevance, but every single thing that I speak of is relevant to the Bahamian people. You know, I understand that he would like me not to speak to certain things at this time. If I have
Honorable member. The point the member for East Grand Bahama made was that you should really speak to the matter that is before the House at the time. Now, I am kind of liberal in allowing members to go on a tangent, but not to remain on a tangent.
Mr. Speaker, I will not reference tangents and how many members go on tangent and stay on tangent, because I think it would be unfair to this honorable House. But I will just quickly summarize these key points, and then I will address them a little later in the afternoon. And I hope you would allow me, in the interest of time, to go through these quick points, and then I'd allow the wrap up of the debate. And then and then I can come back.
Thank you very much.
I will allow the right. Yeah, well, I mean, that's my right, right? I am just saying, I'm speaking to the speaker now. And I appreciate you asking. So, Mr. Speaker, I did touch on that meeting that I attended, and I will address that at another time. I also wanted to touch on a petition that I'll be laying before the House shortly with regards to an event in Grand Bahama. And so I think and then we have some prestigious Centerville constituency awards that I think, you know, because Mr. Kai Mills and from Kai Cares, we'd like to give him an award along with Andrew Allen. But I'll speak to those thereafter. Let me just go to how can we protect and preserve and promote our industry. And I think it's best that we remember that we ought to train our people, you know, and that we must remain competitive in that light, and we must be specialists in our business. And so I'm talking now about the issue of financial services and how we would be able to maintain our competitive edge in the business. We must push for laws, Mr. Speaker, that are accompanied by regulations and policies and guidelines. And this particular act, I remember being brought forward. And there was something in particular that I saw in it. It said that the minister may make regulations. And I continue to argue that we must ensure that ministers do make regulations and policies and guidelines that can help the education and the knowledge to trickle down in that particular business. And so I remember that being a issue for me. Other than that, Mr. Speaker, I think that we must continue to embrace the reality of a vibrant capital markets. We must continue to regulate, but still educate our people. It's one thing, yes, we have to enforce. We also have to stress the need to be a people capable of driving home what it takes to be a sovereign nation. Mr. Speaker, I spoke about the PPP model that was tabled. The NEC and BIA approval process to me is, I have the word for it, but it's just one of those avenues that I think we need to look at in terms of ease of doing business or even business development, period. Many, we spoke to some time ago in the first debate, I think I would have mentioned concessions and how international organizations or companies would be given concessions that we can't really quantify sometimes. But we need to learn how to securitize our resources, of course, to the benefit of the Bahamian people. And of course, use our own capital markets to raise money for ourselves and to make use of that money for the Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, like with the Securities Commission, certain capital commitments are required before a license is issued. I think all of these opportunities, whether it's PPPs or foreign companies or international companies coming to do business in the Bahamas, they must put down some sort of money. I mean, it cannot be where they are able to obtain concessions, whether it's in the oil industry or what have you, go abroad and securitize this, which means, of course, turn it into some debt or security obligation, make money from it, and then we here in the Bahamas just waiting for them to bring the shovel. So I think we need to look at our foreign direct investment policies in terms of international companies meeting more of a substantial obligation in terms of cash. The issue, Mr. Speaker, of transparency and accountability, of course, I don't know if that is just the last person's campaign promise, but it seems to be everybody's campaign promise. But when we get in here and you put on the glove or you get in these seats, it seems like we forget that how technical being accountable and transparent is. It becomes such a vague approach to accountability and transparency. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, which seeks to address, international concerns of tax avoidance and transparency, we hope that these efforts in terms of transparency and accountability, even though we are talking about it as being international, we hope that this same effort is taken locally when we start talking about these public-private partnerships, mining, the oil, aragonite, salt, natural resources. We hope the same level of accountability is something that we consider on behalf of the Bahamian people. So, Mr. Speaker, of course, like I had indicated initially, this is the dangling of the carrot season. And so the Bahamian people will know a lot of things will be dangled in your face. You're going to start getting, we'll do this, we will do that. We could do this and could do that. And I have a hard time right now trying to explain to the people in Centerville that ain't nothing I could do unless the competent authorities say I could do it. So don't blame me. I am doing the best I can with what I have. But if I am not, if it isn't something that others who have that authority want to do, then it cannot get done. And so I want them to start to become more educated on what an MP can do. And if that MP is ostracized or not in a position to do anything, nothing will happen. And so I just wanted to, and that's why I want to bring the attention of this dangling of the carrot, because you're going to see a lot of dangling, and I mean, you know, but it's just crazy the amount of dangling that I think the people will see. But what I want them to know is that, you know, I want them to dangle their own carrot. I want them to go like this. I'll vote for you. I'll vote for you. Come, bring it. So dangle your own carrot. Don't let nobody bring you no carrot, because they may not be there to help you get the carrot. So make sure you dangle your own carrot. Mr. Speaker, Centerville supports this amendment with the minor exception that I'd indicated earlier, that I think the minister must make regulations, not may make them, because it's important. Regulations are important. Policies and procedures are important. Guidelines are important in order for it to trickle down to the average Bahamian citizen. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. And we will have Dangling the Carrot Part 2 after the lunch. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for East Grand Bahama.
Speaker, for the wrap-up, I want to firstly assure the member for Centerville that it's the intention of every man in this place to dangle his own carrot. Oh, sometimes you gotta laugh, Mr. Speaker. It's just, otherwise you go crazy. But Mr. Speaker, I do want to just reiterate that this bill, the original bill and the amendment is to make the Bahamas, or put Bahamas in a position where it is compliant with international standards. That does not make it a bill to satisfy an international agency or international bill as it's characterized. It is very much in the interest of the Bahamian people and our economy to ensure that we have legislation in place, regulations in place that are of international standards that allows us to have the best chance of avoiding these blacklistings and all of the suspicions that these things tend to bring. So I just want to make sure that we understand what it is we're trying to accomplish here. The other thing that I would want to suggest or to say, there were some statements made with respect to the Bahamas as compared to some other jurisdictions. I think Cayman was mentioned and some other jurisdictions. Mr. Speaker, the reality is that some of these other jurisdictions that may have been mentioned are very much up for the same kind of review that we are, and are very likely to be in a significantly different position than we are. And I don't want to call anybody, but I think we should be careful when we start comparing ourselves to other people, because the tracks that we're on may be different. In the same regard, Mr. Speaker, there was a comment made about Bahamas not being engaged, that we should be more aggressive with the EU and the other standard-setting bodies. To give the suggestion that somehow this government has not done its job in representing the interests with vigor, with thought, with proactivity in respect to these international bodies. I want to just remind the House and the Bahamian people that, as the member for Golden Gate said, this has been an issue that's been going from 2000. And necessarily, the Bahamas has had to make adjustments to its legislation as international standards evolve. We call it in the vernacular moving the goalposts. But international standards are evolving. And every time that there is a standard update or an issue is brought by the developed countries in particular in their own interests, then obviously, if we want to be players in this game, in this industry, then we also have an obligation to update our legislation to ensure that we are at global standards. Because we are playing in the global community. This isn't the Bahamas, where you can come and hide and say that you're not going to participate in the rest of the world. We have an obligation. The suggestion was made that the Bahamas has not done enough to ensure that we are not on a blacklist or any other kind of sanction come October 1st. The reality is that we have made submissions as late as in June, and actually even later than that, just recently. But in June, there was a virtual plenary session with the FATF where the issue was brought that we were scheduled for an on-site examination early, I think it was in March, earlier in this year. COVID, unfortunately, prevented the assessors from coming to the jurisdiction. You remember Europe was raging with COVID cases. They could not travel. And so it was delayed. In the plenary, virtual plenary, as the members say, the technology is available, the position was put that they can do a desktop review and give us our sign off to ensure that we don't get here at this October deadline where the matter we have not had the opportunity to demonstrate that we have done all the things that were identified as deficiencies. That remains the case. They have agreed to do some parts, and so we have had or having a partial review, but there's some parts of the on-site review that has to be done here. And so we await the schedule of the FATF assessors to come and do that. Now, if the member opposite knows of some leverage that we as the Bahamas has, that we can go to the FATF and France and Germany and all of these other developed countries and tell them, demand, come to us now or else. Then
The chair recognizes the honorable
I invite the member.
member for Exumas on a point of order.
Speaker, I believe there was a suggestion that the opposition indicated that enough had not been done to remove the country from the blacklist. Speaker, to be clear, and I know that there are a lot of good professionals working on these issues, and I want to be very clear. We requested that the minister lay on the table the tracking of the issues that existed and show us where we are in terms of completion of those issues. So we posed the question, we wanted the minister's assurance and laying on the table the issues that we are discussing.
Honorable member.
So it's misleading.
The member.
It's misleading to suggest that we indicated that we were not happy that the government had done enough. We don't know. There hasn't been that kind of transparency. We asked for transparency. We want to lay the tracking document on the table.
Thank you, honorable member. The honorable member, I believe, was rising on a point of clarification on something that was suggested that he spoke in his speech, that he made in his speech, and he's entitled to do that. On a point of clarification, if he thinks something he said was misinterpreted, he's entitled to do that.
Mr. Speaker, I don't want to debate that issue. I say that I don't believe that there's such a thing as point of clarification. A member can raise on a point of order to question or to, please, come on. Oh, Exuma.
Honorable member, just
Speaker.
Honorable member,
Speaker.
just so the rule could be clear, rule 33.7b. 33.7 says a member who has spoken to a question may again be heard 33.7b to explain a matter or part of his speech
On a point of order.
which he claims has been misquoted or misunderstood, but shall not introduce a new matter or interrupt a member who is speaking and does not give way, nor may any debate. And I think that it's truncated there. Something in the rule is missing. The sentence is truncated at that point.
I take your guidance, Mr. Speaker. The point was made, and I just want to make sure that the members opposite, as well as the Bahamian public, understand that we, as a constituent of this global industry, we do not have the power, unilateral power, to demand this global institution, the Financial Action Task Force, to come when we summon them. They have their schedule. We all know what's happening globally in terms of the crisis. And so we can only petition, and we have made those petitions. Again, you would recall, Mr. Speaker, that this government established an embassy in Brussels, specifically to enhance our relationship with all of these standard setters. And I might say, Mr. Speaker, one of the things that dogs us even today is the relationship, the antagonistic relationship that existed prior to this administration. It's a fact. I hear it every time we go to one of these things we hear about. But again, that's not the point today. What I just want to give the members assurance that the government of the Bahamas has made, is making, continues to make every intervention with these standard bodies to have them either come or to do a total desktop review, as has been suggested. This is not new. The other point that I wanted to make, Mr. Speaker, in respect to consultation can happen in any number of ways. One of the most important and one of the most effective consultations that we've had is that the Ministry of Financial Services, the Attorney General's office, my office as the competent authority on tax matters, we have held consultations with industry regularly over the last 3 years, regularly, giving updates on interventions in Europe, giving updates on legislative matters, giving updates on regulatory matters. Always. The members opposite, Mr. Speaker, are certainly knowledgeable, advised of these dates. All right? So to say that we don't consult with the opposition, I think it would be misleading. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, the last point that I'm going to make as I take my seat is that there is an ongoing working group that reviews all of these matters as they come along. And again, the industry through BFSP and AIBT are constantly on these matters and consulting with the government. There is, I would agree with the member that we do need to continue our efforts to be proactive in terms of new instruments that are compliant for the industry. But this is definitely a very complicated arena that we're working in. The very last point that I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is one that is maybe considered personal. I only want to make this one point. There is a objective by the opposition to paint me in a certain light. I want them to know that it doesn't bother me. I don't mind at all. Right? But what I do want to say, Mr. Speaker, is this, and that is that the member for Southern Central Landers can speak louder than me. There's no doubt about it. The member for Exuma has found his voice as he tries to unseat his leader. Okay? But I'll say this, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to say this.
Honorable members, the chair recognizes Exuma on Ragged Island on a point of order.
I understand the lateness of the hour, and we're attempting to close this debate. I ask that the member for East Grand Bahama withdraw immediately those remarks, and so that we can move on. If he is prepared to make a sincere and unequivocal apology, he should do so. Mr. Speaker, we've accused him of being repeatedly condescending. We take an affront to it, and we would welcome a sincere and unequivocal apology.
Mr. Speaker, when the member apologizes for threatening this member in this house, then we might talk about that. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, I just want to remind them, don't mind this suit.
On the member isn't finished. On what he just said.
I've asked you to ask him to withdraw what the member for East Grand Bahama said, something to the effect of unseating the leader. I asked him that he take it off the public record. It's absolutely untrue, and he should withdraw it right away, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
I demand that he withdraw it.
Mr. Speaker.
The chair recognizes the member for East Grand Bahama.
Speaker.
We don't have them kind of issues over here.
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable members.
Mr. Speaker, I have no difficulty withdrawing my statement that the member is trying to unseat his leader. I withdraw it. I did. But I will say this, Mr. Speaker, that there are members of his party who feel different. Oh, yes, you do. I can send you a WhatsApp in a moment. All right? So while the member may be campaigning for leadership, although he might be campaigning for leadership, be not mistaken to try and drag me into that nonsense. Mr. Speaker, I do not take kindly to threats. I don't. As I say, I'm a humble fella. I come from Long Island, grew up in Grand Bahama, been to public school. One thing I know is how to protect myself. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the one thing my father gave me and my whole family, and anybody knows my family, we are humble people. We don't get into the nonsense. We don't get mixed up in nonsense. Let's make sure that in this house, we remain honorable. That's our obligation, you know. Again, the Bahamian people are looking at us. Let's be honorable. No need for this. Make your point. You don't have to be personal with me. There's no need for that. And you can't threaten me. I don't appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, honorable member. Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a second time and committed. Honorable members, a bill for an act to amend the Register of Beneficial Owners Act. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a second time and committed. Official Owners Act. Further second reading and committal of bills. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further second readings, but Mr. Speaker, I do move that the business of this House will continue beyond 1 p.m. briefly so that we may go into committee of the whole and pass this bill. Then we'll break for lunch. And at 3 o'clock, the Prime Minister will be up with the new resolution. So I do now move that the business of this House, continue beyond 1 p.m.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House will extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this House will extend beyond the 1 p.m. hour. Committee of the whole House.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House resolves itself into a committee of the whole House with the Deputy Speaker in the chair.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the House now dissolve itself into committee of the whole House with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the whole House in the chair. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The House will now dissolve itself into a committee of the whole House with the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the whole House in the chair.
This would be good. Yeah.
Many. Chair recognizes the member for Bamboo Town.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I do move that the long title of a bill for an act to amend the Register of Beneficial Owners Act be agreed.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that the long title of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The long title of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I do now move that the short title and commencement be agreed.
Second. It's been moved and seconded that the short title and commencement of the bill be agreed. As many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The short title and commencement of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I move that clauses 2 through 6 be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that clause 2 through 6 of the bill be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. Clause 2 through 6 of the bill is agreed.
Mr. Chairman, I do now move that the bill in its entirety be agreed.
It's been moved and seconded that the bill in its entirety be agreed. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The bill is agreed in its entirety.
Mr. Chair, I do now move that the Speaker takes the chair.
It's been moved and seconded that the Speaker now do take the chair. Many members that are in favor remain seated. Those opposing will rise. The Speaker will now take the chair. Secondly, to report that the committee has gone through the bill, making no amendments thereto.
Honorable members, the Deputy Speaker and Chairman of the Committee of the whole House has reported that the whole House has gone through the bill, having made no amendments thereto. Third reading and passing of bill. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I move for third reading and passing of a bill for an act to amend the Register of Beneficial Owners Act.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read for a third time and pass. A bill for an act to amend the Register of Beneficial Owners Act. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. Order that the bill be read for a third time.
A bill for an act to amend the Register of Beneficial Owners Act.
Order that the bill do now pass and the title thereof be declared to be the Register of Beneficial Ownership Amendment Act 2020. For the third reading and passing of bills. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, there are no further third readings.
Consideration of Senate amendments. Resolutions. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Kelani. Chair recognizes the honorable member for Bamboo Town.
Mr. Speaker, I do now move that the House suspends until 3 p.m. today, when we will return to debate the resolution.
Honorable members, it has been moved and seconded that the business of this House will now suspend until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as in favor will remain seated. Those who oppose will stand. The business of this House stands suspended until 3 p.m. this afternoon.